And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelist for today's broadcast, Stuart Buglers. Stuart is VP of Consulting Services at Radius. Previously, Stuart held the positions of Client Services Director and Director of Human Capital Consulting at Nair & Co., and has a well-deserved reputation for his strong customer service ethic and technical abilities that span multiple jurisdictions and disciplines. Qualified as a lawyer, Stuart started his career as a fast-track graduate trainee with Lloyd's TSB Bank, undertaking assignments in legal, marketing, and finance. He later went on to specialize in employment law and HR at Lloyd's TSB, attaining his CIPD qualification and operating in a number of leadership roles prior to Radius. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Ed, and welcome to our webinar, where over the course of the next 45 minutes, I'll be delving into the world of low-cost alternatives to a traditional expat, following which we will have time for questions. So let's make a start. Pressure to control costs has sounded the death knell for the traditional expat assignment. When we think of a traditional expat assignment, it conjures up a picture of self-serving senior employees who are onto a good thing. Expats have traditionally received a full range of allowances in addition to their salary. The allowances cover housing, schooling, cost of living, clubs, health insurances, and hardship, with expenses for flights home, furniture, real estate management fees back at home, etc., etc. Over the years, there have been a number of attempts to quantify the costs of an expat assignment. Some figures that provide food for thought are, on average, an expat will receive salaries and allowances that are 2.5 times greater than an equivalent local employee. The average total cost of a US expat assignment per annum is $311,000 US. The average management cost for an expat assignment is close to $25,000 US per annum, compared to just $3,000 US per annum for a local US employee. None of these costs factor in the pre-assignment orientation trips, which can run into tens of thousands of dollars, nor the cost of operating tax equalization, which essentially requires home and host country payrolls with a great deal of specialist advisor time to maintain the hyper-tax calculations and the ongoing true-ups, all of which are an essential part of the process. It's a conspicuous image of excess that shareholders and cost-sensitive finance departments can no longer palate. So in the rush to ditch the traditional expat assignment as a declaration of better cost control, organizations have been filling the void with less expensive alternatives. However, in this scramble, few organizations have actually considered the implications of these substitute arrangements. So the aim of today's webinar is to explore each of these alternatives and discuss the potential risks that each can generate for your business. At this stage, it's probably beneficial if I let you know what these alternatives are and the labels I have attached to them. So we consider that there are four main alternatives to the traditional expat. There's the business traveler, who's always on the move, spreading their time over a number of locations. The short-term rotator, focusing on one particular location but playing the system so that they maintain visitor status. The third country national, who operates in a local role but who is not a local national, nor are they an expat. And the career climber, who fills a typical expat assignment but is motivated by opportunities for career progression rather than a no-expense spared package. But before we look at each in turn, Ed will ask you a polling question.
Thank you, Stuart. Now we'll launch our first of 3 polling questions for today's broadcast. Are you considering low-cost alternatives in place of longer-term expat assignments? Please use the polling screen on the side of your screen. I'd like to thank the audience for responding. We can see approximately 50% of the audience has responded at this time. We'll leave the polls open for approximately 5 to 7 more seconds to give the balance of the audience who cares to respond to the poll the opportunity to cast their opinion. It looks like the majority of the audience who cares to respond today have responded already. We'll go ahead and close the polls now and share the results. Stuart, today it looks like we have a leader at 47% responding yes to a certain extent, followed by a tie at 16% of no, we're still just managing in an ad hoc function, or not at all, or I don't know, and a trailing 12% that yes, I strongly agree, with a distant 9% saying we're considering this approach.
Excellent, some good results. So let's get back to the webinar. Yeah, so the first category we're going to look at, the first cheap alternative to a traditional expat, is the business traveller. So new territories often need an on-the-ground presence to explore opportunities. And business travellers are perfectly suited to the role of fostering your local contacts and forging new networks. So you're not at the stage where you need more sustained formal arrangements, so using business travellers makes sound commercial sense. However, more recently, businesses are keen to leverage as much value as they can out of their business travellers, and they're often blind to the status limits imposed in tax and immigration regulations, because there is a point when a business traveller is no longer considered a business traveller. Businesses are often blind to their responsibilities because each trip is relatively short-lived. It's reasonable to assume that there can't possibly be compliance issues. However, there are two traps that most often catch out unsuspecting business travellers and their employers. Trap number one, from a tax point of view, most businesses have brainwashed themselves into thinking tax liabilities can't be generated until the individual is present in country for 183 days or more. And trap number two, from an immigration perspective, businesses don't realise that there is an official definition of what a business traveller is, based on the type of activities they perform. If activities extend beyond these, then the individual is viewed as a local worker. If we look at the tax aspect first, most of us are familiar with the 183-day rule. In simple terms, if you are employed in another country and present in the host country for less than 183 days, you can't be liable for tax and there's no action required. However, there are a number of reasons why this maxim should be applied with care.